So instead of making a clock that predicts their age, we made a clock that predicted their mortality. We have to figure out ways to empower people. And I think these clinics can offer that as long as they're transparent about what the evidence is. Because the main thing is to change the mindset in the clinics and to convince doctors and also, just general public that understanding biologic age is critical to their long-term health. We're trying to keep people healthy longer, and that should be a global goal, and there should be global solutions. I think that when politics get in the way of that, something's wrong.
I'm so happy to have you here. He's one of the top VIPs of the Rejuvenation Startup Summit. It's the professor from the National University of Singapore and also director of the Longevity Center for Healthy Longevity in Singapore, Professor Brian Kennedy. I'm really happy.
Oh, it's great to be here. I love coming to Berlin.
And this conference, the atmosphere, does it change? Everybody's talking about that, the healthy longevity research and development being exploding. Yeah. Do you feel it here?
Yeah, I definitely feel it here. And I think this meeting is a great example of that. 10 years ago, it was the same 200 academics wandering around the world, talking about someday we're going to change health span, but there was no private sector money. There were, the clinicians generally weren't paying attention. And so it felt like we weren't really making, even though we were making research discoveries, it felt like we weren't making a lot of traction and really making a difference. And now you've got clinicians, biostatistical people, you've got physicists, you've got investors and companies. And so I feel like there's a tremendous difference, and it's really exciting to see.
And everybody needs medication, drugs. Okay, we are really having a lot here, but we have no nutritional supplements and biomarkers and aging clocks because that's not the big business you can make out of that. So you are doing that. In your lecture today, we heard about the new aging clock, the PC clock. Please explain it to our audience.
So people may have heard of aging clocks, and often they're made from omics data, like genome-wide modifications to DNA or DNA methylation or transcriptomics or the changes in different proteins. And those are very meaningful clocks. They're great for research purposes, but it's very hard to use them in the clinic because most doctors are not educated in what omics mean. If someone comes into the doctor's office and says, hey, I measured my aging clock and these 53 methylation sites tell me I'm 10 years too old, the doctor's like, get serious. What are you talking about? And I think that what we try to do is take clinical chemistry, things that doctors understand, HbA1c, CRP, other inflammatory markers, markers of heart function, medical records, and to make a clock from that. And we used the NHANES data set, which is a longitudinal data set in the United States with tens of thousands of people. And there's 25 years follow-up on these people, so we know mortality. So instead of making a clock that predicts their age, we made a clock that predicted their mortality. And so by definition, and at least in that cohort, it says that the measures we're building with this AI-based clock are linked to a clear outcome, not just predicting what age they are right now. And then we can go back from that and apply that clock to the clinic right now. And somebody might come in and their biologic age is too high. We can look at what factors are driving that, and all of those factors have clinical outcomes. So if you have inflammation, there's drugs you can take for that. If your glucose is a little bit too high, you can modify that. So these are all modifiable parameters that a clinician can look at and say, hey, this is an actionable measure, not just an esoteric measure.
So it helps the physician to interpret the blood markers.
Yeah, it's blood markers, medical histories, questionnaires. So it's not, but it's all things that are easily obtainable, relatively cheaply. And most of it are things that doctors already collect. So, we're not asking them to go spend $1,000 doing something different. We're saying we can take, for the most part, what you've already done and reinterpret that in a meaningful way.
And how holistic is that clock? Is also integrated the epigenetic, the methylation?
So we don't use methylation as part of the clock, but I think it's an interesting question. What is the correlation? Excuse me, but what is the correlation between the clinical clock and the methylation clocks? We don't know the answer to that yet. And the other thing we don't know the answer to yet is we've only done this in one large cohort. We're now starting to apply it to Asian cohorts, to other kinds of cohorts, to see if we need to make a different clock for different ethnicities or different regions. And those are questions we haven't answered yet. So I'm confident we can make a clinical clock for any population, but it may be that slightly different algorithm for, you know, Caucasian Americans versus Chinese Singaporeans. So.
But the future of the PC clock is bright. Huh?
I hope so, and we didn't try to make it a private sector thing. We put it out there. We even put the software out. So if people have their own data, they can work with us. We're happy to do that, but they can also do it on their own if they have the capacity.
Great.
Because the main thing is to change the mindset in the clinics and to convince doctors and also, you know, just general public that understanding biologic age is critical to their long-term health. And I think if we can start to really change that mindset and the clinicians can get on board, then it'll make it a lot easier to develop longevity medicine.
Wonderful. And I took today out of your lecture also the AKG, alpha-ketoglutarate. You're quite positive for the future?
I think with our studies with alpha-ketoglutarate, we have increasingly good data that the levels of this metabolite go down with age, and that supplementing it back up improves health span and maybe lifespan. The animal data is quite strong. Our human data is not extremely well controlled yet, but it's indicative of being able to reduce biologic age by several years. We're now going back and testing that in a clinically controlled double-blinded placebo study to validate it. Right now, we've been working with the data we can get access to, which is not that well controlled. But I'm hopeful that we'll see that data repeat in a more controlled study. And I think that's just one of the supplements we're in the near future, we're going to be able to show efficacy in extending health span. And it may be small effects, maybe it's 5 years, I don't know, but 5 years of extra health span for a population with a cheap intervention that can be scaled, it's a huge benefit. It's a huge economic benefit. And just how much would you pay to guarantee or to have on average 5 extra years of healthy living? I think most people would pay a amount of money for that. So because it improves their quality of life. And so I think that we're excited about AKG, not just AKG, there's other supplements too that there's very promising data, but we're excited about AKG.
So I guess so many people are interested to learn from you how you are building up the longevity clinic in Singapore, because there are now sprouting longevity clinics all over the world, and people are saying, I don't know, is this scientific based or not? And you are doing it in a very proper, in a totally proper way. So what's your offer?
Well, let me first say that I'm not directly involved with the clinic. Andrea Meyer is setting that up. And so I can comment a little bit on it, though. I think that what she's trying to do is really base everything in real science, evaluate how people are aging. And part of it is research, right? We're trying to, everybody talks about personalized aging or precision aging. I'm not sure we know how to do that yet. I'm not sure we know how to identify the differences in how people are aging and develop personalized plans to keep them healthy longer. Now, in a sense, we do. If you have high glucose, we know to give you metformin or something like that. But that's really a disease parameter. From a pure aging parameter, I'm not sure we know how to do that. So I think this clinic is trying to, rather than do clinical studies, we're doing those too, but what we're trying to accomplish with this clinic is to treat it as a real world practice and say, can we really help people or not? And can we do it in a safe way that doesn't involve, taking any risk with interventions that are not fully vetted? And I'm really excited to see what Andrea gets from that.
Okay, so which kind of biomarkers she's measuring and interventions she's offering. So I have to ask her, but she's not coming here.
I think it would be better to ask her, yeah. I am involved with a number of private longevity clinics, though, and I can comment on that more broadly if that's helpful. I think that people are trying to figure it out. So longevity clinics are sprouting all over the world. If you look at it broadly, they have different strategies. Some of them do like cosmetic effect, interventions, some don't. Some of them do lifestyle, some don't. I think the ones that do really well are like have good medical practice, are lifestyle modification, and then longevity interventions. And the reason that works is that when people come into the clinic, about 1/3 of them have some medical condition that hasn't been caught by their normal medical practice. And that's not really longevity, but if every time you catch something like that, an individual, you're already helping them. And then the second component is lifestyle. I think almost all of us can modify our lifestyle in ways that will improve our health. Not easy to do that. You can tell people to do it. It's very hard for them to sustain changes in lifestyle. And it really takes an active interaction with the clinic to achieve that. But if you can achieve that, you're really helping people. And then the third component is the longevity interventions, which could be supplements, or it could be drugs, or hyperbaric chambers, or liquid nitrogen showers, or that's really the Wild West. And I think my criteria there is that whatever the clinic does has to have a high safety profile. You cannot take risk in relatively healthy people with interventions that we don't know much about. So if the safety bar is met, though, I think that the efficacy bar is a different question. I think it's perfectly reasonable to say to someone, here's the data why we think this might be helpful to you. We don't have fully validated clinical studies to prove that yet, but we think that if you do hyperbaric chambers, you're going to activate your hypoxic response, and that's going to be good for brain aging. Do you want to be an early adopter and try this, or do you want to wait and see until there's more data? And I think if you approach it from that perspective, it empowers the person at the clinic, the client, to say, where am I at? What do I want to do? What do I think is right for me right now? And they're making decisions based on informed knowledge. And I think we need to do more of that in medicine. We've let too many decisions get into the hands of the doctors. And look, doctors are great. They saved my life twice. I'm not against doctors, but if we can empower people to make their own health decisions, I think they'll be more vested in it, and they'll be more likely to sustain healthy behaviors. Though if it's decided that they need to take a medicine and they understand why and they buy into it, then they'll keep taking it, because like even compliance with pills is very low in the community. So we have to figure out ways to empower people. And I think these clinics can offer that as long as they're transparent about what the evidence is that it works or not. So.
They are promising often pretty much more.
I agree. A lot of them promise more than that, and I'm not comfortable with that. I think it's incumbent on these clinics to collect data and have either evaluate the data themselves at a very high standard or allow collaborators to evaluate that data. Because, look, this is a rapidly growing market. There's no shortage of people that want to come in and be healthy longer. I think what's more important right now is to get data out there, get it published, show what's working, so that we can increase how effective these clinics are. And so I really want to work with clinics that share that data so we can look at it statistically and say, hey, the hyperbaric chambers are actually doing this, there's a health benefit, for instance. I don't know that as an example. But if you're not sharing the data, then you're not helping the science move forward. And I really hope clinics can do that. So.
Another topic, China, Singapore, China, Asia. I saw the news data, 58% of the companies, research, development, healthy longevity, are located in US, 15% in Europe, 10% in whole Asia. Why? Because in China, it's getting also along quite good.
Yeah.
And in Singapore, really, you are working tough. How do you see the future of longevity, not only research and development, but also startup development, companies in Asia, also Singapore?
I think that it's a bit of a paradox, right? Because Asia is where the longest the populations are, and it's where the biggest demographic challenges are. You know, the birth rate in Korea is 0.7, and life expectancy is quite long. And so if ever there's a place where you have to keep people healthy longer so that they're actively contributing to society longer, it's Asia. And that applies to China, Singapore, Japan, Hong Kong. So I think that the private sector has not taken off to the same extent there yet. I think there are different reasons in each country. You know, in Southeast Asia, there's the whole biotech sector is underrepresented. So I think the mindset there up until recently has been, you know, why do I want to invest in a biotech company that is going to have no P&L statement? It's going to have a lot of L statements for a number of years, and then maybe it'll do something and make a lot of money. That mindset wasn't there. Okay. You could invest in real estate development, which is growing like crazy, and have much less risk and similar reward. So I think that's changing now. There's a lot more people that I meet in Singapore that want to invest in biotech, but it's just really starting to happen. China, I think, is heavily invested in aging research, at least on the academic side. And every time I go, I hear about more and more companies that are starting in China. I think right now it's hard to assess what's going on in China because the geopolitical problems have created a wall even between scientists outside China and inside China. And if you let me get political for 30 seconds, I think it's really ridiculous that politics is interfering with collaboration in medical research. I'm one of the few Americans that goes to China now to do collaborations, and that's mainly because I don't have research money coming from the American government. I'm in Singapore. If you have money coming from the NIH, you have to do all this reporting now, and there's a lot of scrutiny, and doubt about what you're doing in China. We're trying to keep people healthy longer, and that should be a global goal, and there should be global solutions. I think that when politics get in the way of that, something's wrong.
And what's your impression about the level of science and research in China?
At the top universities in China, I would say the research is on par or sometimes better than the research in Europe and the US. There are really fantastic projects going on there. In fact, I'm looking at maybe moving back to a university in China just part-time, not giving up the Singapore job, but because I want to work with some of the Chinese scientists there, and also the hospitals have tremendous amounts of human data that can be applied to aging. So I think they have there's certainly economic challenges in China right now, but there's still a lot of funding for science, and there's some really exciting projects. It's really important that we find a way to keep the communication going between the scientists outside China and the scientists inside China, because I think we both have something to teach each other.
Very important impulse. Thank you very much.
Sure. Anytime.